Section 21.3 is about isomerization and isomers. So atoms in a compound can be arranged in different ways to make different molecules. They'll have the same chemical formula, but they might have different properties, maybe very different properties. This is called isomerism. And the different compounds that share the same chemical formula are called isomers. So I'll write that down. Isomers. So let me give you an example of some isomers. Butane and 2-methylpropane both have the same formula of C4H10, and they've got different boiling points. They would have perhaps slightly different reactivities for halogenation and other reactions. These two isomers are pretty similar to each other. They're both alkanes, but we'll see later today some isomers that are even more different than these. You can see how they've got the same number of atoms, but they're connected differently. For example, in methylpropane, that second carbon is connected to 3 neighboring carbons instead of just 2. The larger a chemical formula is, the more isomers it will have. Take something with 40 or 50 atoms, and now the different permutations of ways that you can arrange them are going to grow exponentially. So very large molecules will have thousands, tens of thousands of different isomers. Let me advance the slideshow. So I want to point out that single bonds have free rotation. A molecule can rotate around a single bond, and so what you see here are 2 different orientations of the butane molecule. But they're the exact same molecule. They are not isomers. Those are just different orientations of the same molecule. And the difference is that butane is constantly twisting around those bonds. It looks like a little wiggly worm. So a butane molecule will interconvert from the one on the right and on the left and the one on the right. It will interconvert between those rapidly at room temperature without any barrier. And so these are not isomers, they are just different orientations of butane. So the isomers that we've looked at so far that have different bonding arrangements of atoms are actually just the simplest type of isomer. And they are called structural isomers. So structural isomers are where, if you labeled all of the atoms, this is atom A, B, C, D, E, then you would have different atoms bonding in different ways. Again, like I said, that second carbon in methylpropane is bonded to 3 carbons and 1 hydrogen instead of 2 carbons and 1 hydrogen for the second carbon in butane. So those are structural isomers, but they're not the only kind of isomer. So the next type is called a, we'll call them stereoisomers. And stereoisomers are where you can have molecules that all are have the same bonding partners. That is, like atom A is bonded to atom D, or whatever schema you have for naming and labeling the atoms. And yet they're still different in some way in 3-dimensional space. And that doesn't make a lot of sense until you see examples. So let's just dive right into the first kind of stereoisomer, and that is cis-trans isomers. So cis-trans isomers have everything to do with double bonds. Sorry, I'm advancing to figure 2113. There it is. Which is just an butene molecule where you have CH3 and then CH and then a double bond to the next carbon CH and then a CH3. So this is a 2-butene molecule. And if we remember back to 1210, that double bond is composed of two parts. There's a sigma bond that is formed by overlap of hybrid orbitals. It's pointed directly along the bond axis. And then there is a pi bond, which is formed by unhybridized p orbitals. They overlap above and below the bond axis. And that's what we're looking at right here. Those purple unhybridized p orbitals overlap, and they form the second half of that double bond. Well, you can rotate freely around a single bond. We already showed that with the butane. But if you were to try to rotate that molecule around the double bond, then those p orbitals would no longer overlap. And if they don't overlap, then they aren't bonding anymore. And so in order to twist that, you would need to have enough energy to break that double bond, break the pi bond component of the double bond. And that's not impossible, but it requires more energy than is just readily available at room temperature. You would need to provide an energy input, and it would be a proper chemical reaction to twist around that double bond. So because you cannot rotate around double bonds, that introduces the possibility of cis-trans isomerization. So figure 2114 is going to show how the butene can be arranged in two different ways. Now these are Lewis dot structures, but at least around the double bond, it's actually a good representation of how the molecule actually looks in three-dimensional space. Right? Those carbons are sp2 hybridized, trigonal planar geometry, and so what you see here is actually a good representation of the three-dimensional shape of these two molecules. On the left side here, you see cis-2-butene has got the two hydrogens both on the bottom of the double bond, and then the two methyl groups or CH3 groups both on the top side of the double bond. It's called cis because the non-hydrogen groups are on the same side of the double bond. And then over here on the right, you have trans-2-butene. And here the hydrogens are on opposite sides of the double bond, and the methyl groups are on opposite sides of the double bond. And so if I were to look at these molecules and say, well, what atoms are bonded to what atoms? They're the same. You know, the first carbon is bonded to the second carbon is bonded to a hydrogen in the third carbon is bonded to a hydrogen in the fourth carbon. All of the atoms have the same bonding partners, but because there's no free rotation around that double bond, they can still be oriented differently in three-dimensional space. And so they make they make stereoisomers of each other, cis and trans. So cis-trans isomers do not exist for every compound with a double bond. If you ever have two identical groups on either side of the double bond, then you cannot have cis-trans isomers. I guess I better draw you an example of what I mean by that. So if you have carbon, double bond, carbon, and if you have, say, two hydrogens, well, then there will be no cis-trans isomerization because rotating around that double bond doesn't change the molecule in any way. And it doesn't just have to be hydrogens. You know, if you had CH3 and CH3, then also those are identical, and so rotating around the double bond will not change anything about the molecule, and so it won't produce a new isomer. So that is cis-trans isomerization. Okay, and then lastly we have optical isomers. Now, optical isomers are named in this way because optical isomers will actually bend light in a different way than normal isomers. It's a little bit weird, but if you send radially or circularly polarized light into a sample of a pure optical isomer, then it will change the direction of that polarization ever so slightly. So that's why it's called an optical isomer. These are perhaps the hardest ones to understand. So let me pull up a figure. An optical isomer is a molecule which is chiral. So a chiral molecule has optical isomers. A molecule with optical isomers is said to be chiral, which make those kind of almost synonyms of each other. And what it means for an object to be chiral is that its mirror image is not superimposable on itself. And so we've got an example up here of a hand. You see the hand is being reflected in the mirror. And the mirror image of the hand is structured in very much the same way as the hand itself. For example, it's got the thumb next to the pointer finger next to the index finger, it's got the palm on the opposite side from the back of the hand. You know, you could describe your hand in 100 ways, and those descriptions would apply equally well to the mirror image. And yet, they're not quite the same thing. If you look at the picture there, it looks like a left hand is being held up to the mirror, and the mirror image of the left hand looks like a right hand. So your right and your left hands are mirror images of each other. And they're not the same thing. I can prove that by... Oh, let me get rid of this picture for a moment. Okay, I brought a object lesson. Here is a pair of gloves, and they fit on my hands nicely. Right? The right glove on the right hand, the left glove on the left hand. Well, if I switch the left glove to go onto my right hand, you can probably see that we're going to run into a bit of a problem. The thumb to the glove is here, but the thumb of my hand is there. Well, I could fix that, I guess, and flip it around, but now it's really uncomfortable because the palm of the glove is on the back of my hand and the back of the glove is on the palm of my hand. So right-handed gloves don't fit on left hands. Left-handed gloves don't fit on right hands, even though you'd really be hard-pressed to say what the difference is between them. They've both got thumbs and fingers in all the right places. Anyway, molecules are the same way, at least chiral molecules are, where their mirror image may not be superimposable on each other. Let me really quickly, I'm just all about the object lessons here. Let's say I have some safety earmuffs here. This is not a chiral object. The mirror image of the chiral object works just fine. I could wear it like this, or if I were to flip it around, it fits just fine. You know, there's no left ear and right ear to a pair of earmuffs. So not all objects are chiral, and not all molecules will exhibit optical isomers. And so we need to get a little bit particular about how to recognize when a molecule is chiral. I'll throw this picture up one last time. We have an example of a chiral molecule there. It's got a tetrahedral geometry, and what you see is that each of the 4 atoms bonded to that central atom is different. A, B, C, and D in this case are different molecules, or different atoms. They're 4 unique groups. So anytime you have 4 unique groups, then the molecule will be chiral and it will exhibit optical isomerism. So let me give you a few examples of molecules which exhibit optical isomerism. So a fairly obvious one would be something like CHFCl, Br. So this would be bromochlorofluoromethane. And it's got 4 unique groups all bonded to the same center. And so bromochlorofluoromethane is a chiral molecule. It will exhibit optical isomers, and that means that there will be a right-handed version and a left-handed version that are actually different in their 3-dimensional orientation. So that's one example. Let me draw you another example really quickly. So 3-chloro-3-methylhexane. Let's draw that out. Hexane means 6 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I won't fill in the hydrogens just because that's a bit tedious, but you know what is going on there. So 3-chloro-3-methylhexane. So I'll put a Cl on the 3rd carbon here, and I'll put a carbon right there. This just looks like a regular old organic molecule, but if we focus on that carbon in the center, then it has 4 distinct groups attached to it. It's got an ethyl group here, it's got a propyl group there, it's got a methyl group there, and it's got a chloro group there. 4 distinct groups all attached to the same center means that this is a chiral molecule. There will be a left-handed and a right-handed version. And in fact, you don't even need the chloro. If this were just a hydrogen, that would also be a unique group. And so 4 unique groups bonded to the same center makes this an optical isomer. In addition to molecules like this, you can also have sort of macro structures that are chiral. Say the helix in a protein is chiral. The helix of DNA is chiral, just like a spiral staircase is also chiral. There's a staircase that there's a staircase that as you walk up it, your left hand can grip the center post and your right hand is swinging around the outside. That would be a right-handed spiral staircase. And if you could flip it upside down, you'd find that it's the same. You know, the left hand would be in the center post and the right hand would swing around. Well, the mirror image of that staircase would be a left-handed, would be the opposite, where your right hand would be in the middle and your left hand would be around the outside. So helices or spirals are also chiral. And just really quickly, I want to give you an example of optical isomerism that I find terribly fascinating. There is a product out there called, and I'll write it down so you can Google it. It's called levomethamphetamine. And this is a product that you can buy in the grocery store, not even in the pharmacy, just you can buy it in the over-the-counter drug section. And it's like a menthol sort of thing that you sniff up your nose when it's congested, and it's going to help to decongest your nose. Levomethamphetamine just means left-handed methamphetamine, and it is the left-handed version of rectomethamphetamine, which is the drug methamphetamine that I'm sure you've heard of and have been thinking about ever since I wrote that down. So if someone synthesizes methamphetamine as a drug, and they aren't careful about their synthesis, then they're going to have about half of their product be kind of like a useless decongestant, and half of it will be the drug that they desire. And if you instead want to run a legitimate business and you want to synthesize only the decongestant, then you're going to have to take great pains to make sure that you're synthesizing only the left-handed version of that molecule. And even after you've synthesized it, you're probably going to want to have several steps of trying to purify away the right-handed version of it because it's a drug that's regulated. So anyway, I think it's just wild that the left-handed version of methamphetamine is an over-the-counter drug. And the reason why they have such different effects on our bodies is the same reason why a right-handed glove or a left-handed glove has a really different effect on my right hand. Right? Our bodies have chemical receptors that are also chiral, that also have left-handed and right-handed versions, and basically the molecule for levomethamphetamine fits somewhere in your nose and causes it to become runny and decongested. And the right-handed version of methamphetamine fits on some molecule, I don't know, in your brain or something, and does whatever methamphetamine does. Make sure you tell the dean I don't know what methamphetamine does from personal experience. So that's it for 21.3. Isomerism is an interesting and diverse topic, and you'll revisit it in organic chemistry. But these are the primary types of isomers. Structural isomers are just arranged differently in a straightforward way. Stereoisomers have the same bonding partners, but there's something about their orientation in three-dimensional space that makes them distinct. Cis-trans is all about what side of a double bond the substituted alkyl chains are on. Optical isomers have to do with left-handed versus right-handedness, or how the mirror image is non-superimposable. Okay, we'll stop it there.